You're listening to Accents, a radio show for literature, art, and culture. I'm your host, Katerina Stoikova, and my guest today is writer Helena Kriel. Hi, Helena, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Katerina. Hi.
Hi, I've known you a while, and I've wanted to interview you since the first moment I met you. And I guess now is the right time because you have a new book. But let me say a few words. That you are a writer, actress, world traveler, and an animal activist. And the main occasion for this conversation is your new book, Meditating with Rhinos. So let's start with that.
Do you want me to say
Yes,
how it
please
came
talk about your
about?
book.
Okay,
Uh,
so what happened? The genesis of this book was I inadvertently found my way to a rhino sanctuary. I didn't know it was a rhino sanctuary at the time. I was in a particularly sort of vulnerable personal time in my life. I was getting divorced from a person that I thought was the one. There was a lot of romantic illusion wrapped up in the relationship. And when it fell apart, I was in a sort of particular, it was a kind of a crisis for me personally. And it was going along with the Writers Guild strike. So it was sort of a professional and personal crisis that I was going through. It was a low period, let's say. And to get away from everything, I accompanied my sister to a wild animal sanctuary just to get away from things, to get out of my head, you could say. And so she didn't know what animals were gonna be there, and I said I didn't really care. And when we arrived there and we drove up, I saw these grey shapes behind the poles of the night of these enclosures, and I realized that it was rhinos. And I had a sort of a spontaneous surge of emotion because the whole crisis that rhinos have been in has been something that has been very, very sort of extremely sad to me. What rhinos have been facing, how rhinos are being butchered, how rhinos are facing extinction. And so when I saw the rhinos in these enclosures and realized that I was so close to them and that potentially I was going to even be working with them, I was just stunned. And I had this emotion came up in me, and literally it wasn't more than an hour later, I had a bottle in a baby rhino's mouth. And I was at the sanctuary for 3 weeks. And during that 3 weeks, a kind of extraordinary set of events took place. I was given a very interesting and personal contact with baby rhinos. I was, in fact, even allowed to work with them. I was put in charge of 5 of them. And at the end of that 3 weeks, I just felt it felt as if my life was different. It felt as if my life was going to line up very differently going forward. And I came away from the Rhino Sanctuary just feeling that I couldn't return to so-called normal life. There had to be something that I could contribute. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to contribute, but I'm a writer, so it made sense for me to write something about it. And I'm also somebody that's run a nonprofit before, so I thought, all right, there's a possibility that I could actually help in 2 different ways. One, by writing a piece of work about this and hopefully getting it out into the world. And the other thing was starting a nonprofit. So I did both. So the book is the second thing actually that I wrote. I wrote an action adventure love story, a movie, because I'm a movie writer. So I wrote a movie. It's optioned with 2 producers, and hopefully it goes into the world. And then the memoir, which is the Meditating with Rhinos that's just been released, is the second piece that I wrote about it. So the book is the first piece that's gone into the world, and hopefully a movie will go into the world as well. And my intention with the Katerina is to bring attention in a way that's not heavy and in a way that is hopeful. I mean, I say about the book that it's a book with many happy endings. So you might think that you're going to be reading a book that it's about poaching and it's about butchery and it's about, trauma. And that is part of it, of course, because it is about rhinos. But it's very much a book about hope. It's a book about good stories that end positively. Because the thing that I came to know about rhinos is that they are an incredibly resilient animal. So you start the story with a rhino that has come in from seeing its mother being poached. It's potentially, had a completely terrible time. And in the process of 3 weeks, it turns around. Everything turns around. So it's a story about resilience. It's a story about turning things around. And my own life turned around. That was the sort of remarkable thing about it, is that when I came to the sanctuary, I myself was such a mess. I myself was so struggling to find, where do I belong and how do I go forward now? And in the process of working with rhinos, I probably thought that I was helping them, but actually they were helping me. That's really the truth of it. So that's the genesis of the story of the book.
Do you have a passage that you would want to read to us now from the book?
Sure. I'm happy to read for you. I guess that it makes sense for me to read a section about, this is the first time that I was ever given access to a baby rhino. Mm-hmm. So I'll read a section from there. I'm closed into the night pen, and I'm suddenly alone in here, in the semi-dark, with a young rhino lying at my feet. The night pen is small, with hay on the floor to keep him comfortable. Both doors, front and back, are closed, and the afternoon slices in horizontally through the slats, patterning the wall and the rhino in coruscating lines of light. I breathe in and out slowly, attempting to calm myself, and perhaps him. He's settled. I don't want to disturb him by changing my position on the straw. The last thing I want is him blundering up in chaos and throwing himself around in here. I'm so nervous. Do I dare sit down by his side? The milk has soothed him. He is dozing and his eyes are half open. Like a Tai Chi practitioner, I bring myself very slowly to a seated position near him so he can feel me, a body, some warmth to penetrate his aloneness. There's just enough room for me and the rhino to be together, and there's just enough room for us to move around and maybe even for him to turn, but that's about it. I sit on the straw, mindful, the Buddhist word, mindful. I'm aware of the privilege, not questioning my place in it, and wanting only to make it a bit better for him, gentler than the madness of his life over the last few days. He's asleep, eyes closed now, breathing in regular. I sit beside him. It seems peaceful. I lay my hand on his body. He doesn't flinch or show any kind of resistance. And once I'm sure that he's okay, with the pressure of my hand on him, I run my hands up and down his body. His hide is wrinkled, leathery. I can smell him, and he smells of animal, of outside. It's a thick and deep smell, a smell of must and mud, half sweet, half salty. I breathe in deep, taking him in.
That is so beautiful and alive, Helena. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the first time that I was actually, put in close contact with a baby rhino. I mean, this little guy had come in. His mother had been poached, been abandoned near her dead, and he had drunk blood to stay alive. He drank her blood for 7 days to stay alive. And when they brought him in, he was completely traumatized. He was bolting out of sleep in nightmares. He actually totally smashed the crate that they had him in. Mm-hmm. They had him in sort of a big wooden crate, and he smashed the crate. He just smashed it to smithereens. I mean, that's the level of his despair. And they couldn't get him to drink milk. And they knew that they were in trouble, because unless a baby rhino starts drinking milk, it starts going down really quickly. And once a little rhino starts going down, it's very difficult to catch them. I mean, they can easily die. So having him drink milk was very important to them. And this was a crisis that the sanctuary was facing, because he couldn't drink milk.
And you witnessed the recovery of that young rhino. Do you remember
Yeah,
how he started drinking milk?
Katerina, that is sort of really the big experience that started me on this whole journey. What happened, I'm going to give you a little bit of it, but I'm not going to give you all of it because I would love the reader to read about it because
Okay.
it's really the thing that started this whole journey. But what happened was the founder and the person who runs the Rhino Sanctuary is this incredible, formidable force of nature. Her name's Petronelle Nevos, extraordinary sort of force of nature. And we had these morning meetings, and she came into the morning meeting, and there were a small group of us volunteers sitting there, and she said, look, we're in a crisis here. This rhino won't drink milk. He's severely traumatized. What we need to do is try and create some peace around the night where he is. So if we create some peace, then hopefully we can start to rehabilitate him a little bit. And then, if he starts to calm down, he'll drink milk. And she said, we have to create a real sort of island of quiet around the night pen. She didn't want any talking. She didn't want, cars coming and going. She didn't want any dogs around there. She wanted absolute quiet. And I said to her, it just sort of occurred to me because I meditate, and I said to her, would it help if I meditate outside the night pen? Because I know that meditation brings stillness. I mean, you meditate, I know you do, and I know that you yourself have experienced the power of meditation, and that meditation changes energy. It changes reverberation. So I thought to myself, there's nothing to lose here. If I go and meditate outside this rhino's night pen, who knows?
Right.
So I said to Petronelle, should I meditate outside the night pen? And she said, okay, let's try it. She was desperate. So she said, meet me there after breakfast. And I bolted through breakfast and met her back at the night pen. And she actually didn't show up for 2 hours. She was busy with another crisis. So I was sort of there outside the night pen with this little rhino behind closed doors. And I thought, okay, I can't sit waiting for her. I've got to do what I came here to do, which is meditate. So that's what I sat doing. And then after I'd meditated probably for about an hour, I engaged in an experiment. And this experiment is kind of what started everything. It's this experiment that came out of my meditation. And that's what I'm not going to tell you about, because I'd rather that the reader reads this thing that happened. But I'll jump forward a little bit, which is after what I chose to do. And then I was invited into the night pen. That's the section that I just read to you, where I was sort of taken into the night pen. And the rhino drank milk. That's what happened. So there's a sort of pivotal thing that happened in the middle that I'm not going to tell you about, because I'd rather that the reader reads about it in the book.
What was the name of the little baby rhino?
Okay, so the rhino's got a really odd name. His name was Mabush. And, whenever I mention his name, people are just sort of so odd, find it to be such an odd name. Mabush was the name of the ranger that rescued him. So he was a Black guy working in the game reserve, this fantastic ranger, and he had this exotic name, Mabush. So the rhino was named after him. So his name was Mabush.
Okay, here's a question. So I guess you've been writing about rhinos and your experiences with them for a while. You wrote this screenplay, that's my understanding, another book and screenplay, and then this book. What is different between them? Tell us, is one of them continuation from the other?
No, they're very, very different, Katerina. Okay. The screenplay, I set out to write something very commercial with the screenplay. I wanted a straight down the line action adventure love story with a very classic protagonist and a very classic antagonist, with a sort of a deep love affair, which I hoped would encourage women to come and see it, and sort of really intense action, which I hoped would bring men into the movie. And it's got a Vietnamese ranger in it, so that I hope that I could get a Vietnamese audience into it, because Vietnam is the place where there's the most sale of rhino horns. I really wanted to get it into Vietnam. So I had very sort of specific ideas that I had for the movie, and I wanted it to be a very commercial thing. The book is a memoir, so it's personal. It's my story. The screenplay is not about me at all, but the book is about me. Following classic memoir style. I'm the protagonist. It's my story. It's the change that happens to me. It's who I am at the beginning, who I am at the end. And the characters in the memoir are completely different to the characters in the movie. Basically, the characters in the movie are all fabricated, whereas the characters in the memoir are all people that I met in the process of my experiences at the sanctuary. And also, the memoir is set between South Africa and America, whereas the movie is pretty much set mainly in South Africa. So the memoir is a combination of the life that I live in America and the life that I live in South Africa. So they're two completely different stories.
Selfishly, I want to see that movie too. I want to see the movie of your memoir as well. And here's the question I had prepared towards later in our conversation, but let me ask it now. Traveling between USA and South Africa, and I have my own view of those experiences living in two different countries.
Of course.
So what is it to live in two different countries?
My Lord. Katerina, I want to hear about your experience living in two countries, because there's so few people who understand it. I mean, you understand it, and honestly, I want to hear your feeling about it. I mean, I shuttle between two countries. I have two lives, and like I say to people often, like, one life wasn't enough. I mean, why did I have to have two lives? It's a crazy thing. I've got important people in both places. I have dogs in both places. I have houses in both places. And the one place is so far away from the other. I mean, it takes me 26 hours on a plane to get from the one place to the other. It's rich. It's very cross-cultural. It demands a high level of flexibility. It's not always comfortable. It's a lot of the time it's not comfortable. But I feel as if I'm very bilingual culturally. And I like that. I like to be bilingual culturally. I mean, I never see an American person as an American or a South African person as a South African. They are absolutely people to me. And I like that. And the other thing that I've found that I like a lot is that originally it was very hard for me, because I kept thinking to myself, where is home? Is America home? Is South Africa home? What is home? Where do I belong? And it started to become very uncomfortable for me, that whole notion of where do I belong and what is home. And eventually I had to absolutely take it upon myself to realize that I am home. Right. That home is something within me. Because if I was attaching home to a set of people and a house and conditions in the outside world, it became very fragile. So I think that it encouraged in me a real flexibility of the spirit, which is that I can bounce between two hemispheres and two very, very different sets of circumstances, totally different cultural paradigms. I mean, the South African paradigm is so different to the American paradigm. South Africans have a very different kind of mindset. They behave so differently to Americans. And it was sort of really interesting to bounce between these two different cultural mindsets. And it required this flexibility of me. And I think I have become a very flexible person because of that. What about you, Katerina? Can I ask you? I mean, how does it feel for you?
Well, when I was writing the question, I guess it was a little bit of a Freudian slip, because I wrote, what is it like to live between two countries? Not living in one or the other, living between them. So I don't think I'm entirely in one or entirely in the other. I am in my own space. And exactly as you said, it was, it's like home is me, and the immigrant as a snail. The immigrant as a snail. Also, I had to get over it. If I wanted to keep both my places, I had to get over it, because I kept on writing these teary little immigrant poems. And once I was, riding in my car, just my tears streaming down my cheeks and thinking, I've been in the United States for 15 years. What's going on? Why do I feel here so temporary?
Right.
And then the answer came, well, if I were in Bulgaria, that also would be temporary. I mean, no one is here forever.
Right.
So that helped me just put things in perspective. But what really helps me is shuttling between the two places. And yes, life needs to be flexible. And actually, I like that. I like having two different lives. And I like having two rich, fulfilling, complete lives in two places. I think this is so incredibly, you said it, rich. And it's a gift and privilege, because one wasn't enough.
Crazy. Katerina, I'm just so glad to have this conversation, because honestly, you are the only person that I know that I could have this conversation with, literally. The only person who sort of really understands jumping from two paradigms. I sometimes feel as if, when I step from South Africa to America, that I'm stepping across, the continent. It's what are the plates? It's tectonic plates.
Yeah.
And, I always feel as if before I step like from one tectonic plate onto another, I'm on this fault line. And it's sort of in the moment of being on the fault line that's really the most uncomfortable thing. But once I'm sort of on the next plate, then I settle down again, and I'm very much in the groove of it all. I mean, right now I'm going to be moving back to America in about 3 weeks' time, so I'm starting to feel sort of that creeping sort of what would you call it? It's a sort of it's an emotional vulnerability, I guess. I'm sort of listening to the birds so strongly, and I'm looking at the bougainvillea so strongly, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to listen to those birds. I'm not going to see this bougainvillea, because I haven't quite gotten onto that next plate yet, where I'm listening to the coyotes, and I'm looking at the mountains, and I'm looking at the oak trees. I'm still in sort of the paradigm of these trees, this bougainvillea, this garden, this green, and this has claimed me, and that yet hasn't claimed me. So when that claims me, it'll be great, but it's just the movement between the one thing and the other that is uncomfortable.
So let me ask you this, because that's another thing that only you can tell me, and that is creativity and its portability and the price of travel. The hidden cost of travel is time, and not only the physical time of preparing for traveling there, because it takes a while to get there too, and then recovering from the trip. Also, there is the context switching, and actually, I don't want to say, you say, what is the hidden cost of travel to creativity? How does it affect you? I mean, both the positive and the difficult things.
Do you mean exactly the process of the travel itself, or a life of travel?
No, I mean, life of travel is wonderful, but the thing is, it affects my writing. I'm going to speak from personal experience. It affects my writing. I write less when I travel. And basically the sheer busyness with other things and distractions doesn't help my writing. But when I go from one place to another place, I write different things. I listen to different languages, and that helps me in different ways. I feel like it helps my creativity, and then it affects it. What about you?
The thing is that my work is very, very global. Um, um, that's something that Sina Gita Nasland, our wonderful Sina, said to me once about my writing. She says, you've got a very global reach. And I think that's only because I have this particular life. I can write very honestly about living in America. I can write very honestly about living in South Africa. I can write very honestly about traveling through India. And I think that gives my writing a particular kind of global thing that it wouldn't have otherwise. I'm pretty good at taking my pen and my paper everywhere that I go. I don't think that I'm impacted so much by travel. I think I'm impacted by situations. I think certain situations make me more creative than other situations. Like, for example, if I go to a rhino sanctuary, um, that makes me creative because we'll use the word exotic. It's a highly exotic situation. So I'm going to be reaching for my pen. Or if I have an encounter with somebody that's provocative for one reason or another, their dialogue is provocative, or they bother me in a certain way, or they upset me, or they make me laugh, or whatever, I'm going to reach for my pen. I'm definitely reaching for my pen if somebody's dialogue interests me. I'm going to be reaching for my pen if I'm in a sort of a natural situation and it's so, so beautiful. Nature stuns me. I love it so much. So it doesn't matter where I am, that's the thing that's going to make me reach for my pen. I mean, I can be in either place and feel no need to write. So I think it's very, very circumstance bound for me. It's not really about the travel so much, I think.
In your world traveler, you take people with you on journeys. I've been fortunate enough to have gone to a journey to India with Helena and a few select friends. And there I saw how comfortable you are in completely different circumstances. You belonged in India, and you were as natural and comfortable as in Louisville that I've seen you. So how do you do that?
That's so nice to hear, Katerina. I really like that. You know what I would say? I would say that I, through all of this traveling, have become quite adept at connecting with people, with places. Nothing feels foreign to me. It sort of all feels playful to me. And I think that it's in connecting in a playful way that grounds you to wherever you are. It doesn't matter if you're in, we went to the Jaipur Literature Festival, for
Mhm.
example. So, it was in interfacing with that crazy, crazy festival. The parrots are flying in the trees and there are 10,000 people walking here and there. And, you're going in and out of places where they're selling incredible fabrics. And then there's the guy who's selling the chai and he's like pouring the arcs of chai, and wherever we went was just this connection. So it's sort of the thing doesn't overwhelm me because it sort of almost gets broken up into moments where I just connect with this thing, then I connect with the next thing, and it feels playful to me. um, um, India, you had this experience of me in India, and I find India a very playful place. I find Indians are very playful people. If you intersect with the guy in the tuk, and you have a conversation with him as you're bumping along the road, and it smells of incense one moment and sewage the next moment, and the cows crossing the road in one moment, and then, you know, you've got a car coming next to you and you think it's going to bash into you, and it's all insane. But it's you having this crazy conversation with the guy that's driving you along. I mean, how much more fun can it be than that? So it's like that. I think, Katerina, what it is for me that I love having fun and I love playing. And I think travel enables that for me.
During that trip, you said something that I wrote down, remembered, and I have quoted you to so many people. You said, before you sit down to write, you have to stand up to live.
So listen, I mean, I would love to claim that as my own, but I was using, and I think I think it was Anais Nin who said it.
Okay.
It wasn't me, but I use that because I don't think you, well, for myself, I would say I can't write in a colorful way unless I live in a colorful way, you know? It feels to me as if I'm writing, trying to suck stuff out of my thumb, so to speak, it gets very banal very quickly. It gets dry. So I mean, like, for example, I've just finished writing this memoir. I wrote it in 10 months. It was an insane creative experience. I mean, I'm exhausted, I have to tell you. I am brain dead from writing this memoir in 10 months. And I'm part of a writers group, and everybody is in the process of writing their work. And I don't have anything I want to write. So I'm showing up to this writers group, and I don't have anything to write because I've got to go and live again. I've got to go and do something in the world again. I can't sort of come out with like a huge piece of work and then suddenly be straight away into the next piece of work. I know some people are like that. Like Stephen King, for example, apparently writes every single day. I mean, he's just that kind of creative genius, and his genius works in that way where it's just generating and generating, and he jumps from one story to the next and on he goes. I can't be like that. I have to go out and I have to sort of create a funnel for myself. I have to sort of open myself like a funnel, and I have to allow things to sort of come into myself and fill myself up again. And then I'm ready again to be creative. That's just how I function as a creative individual.
Most people that I know function that way, myself including. I kind of like build in, after publishing a book, I build in a few months that I just work on other people's stuff, or, you know, just follow up on things. Where did you write your book? In South Africa or in the United States?
So the book was written between both places. I started out in America, and but I was writing it sort of in a little bit of a jumbled way because I had other work that was going on. So it was sort of fragmented kind of writing. But I did embark on it in America, and then I got to South Africa just before this crazy coronavirus went insane on us. And I got stuck in South Africa, and it's everything shut down. I mean, South Africa went into level 5 lockdown. When I'm in South Africa, I stay with my mom. She's 84. My stepfather is 91. And, you know, they are in the very extreme version of fragility in terms of the virus and everything. So I got into an unbelievable level of lockdown. And everything facilitated writing. I mean, I could never have written this book in 10 months if I didn't write it in lockdown. I mean, I couldn't go out. I couldn't see people. You know, going up the road for coffee was not a possibility. I just had to be here. So that's how I wrote it. Basically, the most of the writing was done in South Africa in lockdown.
I would love to hear another passage from the book.
Okay. One sec, let me get you one. me get you one. Okay, so Katerina, I'm going to read you. It's the same situation now. So that little baby ran in my bush. I went in, I touched him and whatever, and then I'm just jumping a little bit further in the same scene. Okay. Shoulder, keep to the shoulder. Don't let his head face you. Be careful of your feet. Sam's instructions to me. Okay. I fumble, positioning myself by this little rhino's shoulder. He moves, trying to understand the geography of this tiny space, going forward, back, only to be confronted by walls. Before, he had endless space, the bush stretching rumpled to all horizons, nothing to halt his movement, trees, a crocodile-infected lake, all the elements of his young, known world. But now there is nothing known. It's all foreign, straight, no curves. There's no rising sun to warm him after a long, cool night. No noonday heat to beat along his back, turning his hide to a slow burn. There's no muddy wallow to sink down into and heave from side to side, cooling the day's burn. There's no stroking of long grass or the sound of the summer birds in the thickets. There's no smell of elephants lumbering through their low rumblings to one another, causing a vibration under his feet. No hunt with another baby rhino. There's no familiar smell of the rhino midden, with all the scents of friends near and far come to relieve themselves and leave each other messages. There's no cool sand to lie down in. There's no mother's rhino horn to gently poke the way in. There's no mother's big, hefty side to lean against. No mother's pounding heart to measure the beat of the world in. There is no incremental movement of the sun from horizon to horizon. Instead, he has me, this panicked and confused human who's positioned herself cemented to his shoulder, and the cold, hard walls that confront him, and the bounce of hay beneath his feet.
Thank you, Helena. So beautiful. Can you please show us the cover and please describe it to our listeners?
Okay, so that's the cover. Can you see it, Katerina?
I can, yes.
Okay, so that's the cover. That's me on the cover, and I'm sort of embracing a tiny little rhino. I've got my hands around his face. So that's the cover. This little guy was not my bush. This little guy was another rhino. I mean, I could read you a little section on him if you want me to later. His name was Manji, and that little rhino came when he was a day old, literally. His mother was poached when he was a day old, and he arrived at the sanctuary. I mean, he was wrinkled from being in his mother's womb. He was still wrinkled like that when he came in. So that's that little rhino who's on the cover of the book.
I have a question about the optimism of the story. I understand that it's a memoir, but how optimistic can we be about the surviving of the rhinos?
You know, Katerina, it's a very dismal situation. I mean, it cannot be more dismal than it is. First of all, the demand is as high as it's ever been for rhino horn. This absolute nonsense that rhino horn has curative properties, that it'll cure your erectile dysfunction, and it'll cure your libido, and it'll cure your hangover, and it'll cure your cancer, and all this nonsense. So the demand is as high as it's ever been. And poaching is really as high as it's ever been. So one could look at that and say, what are the chances here? What is the hope here? But there are amazing people that are bringing unbelievable passion to this. And the rhino is a really sort of interesting character, that it magnetizes light and dark towards it. It magnetizes the best of humans and the worst of humans. But I have been exposed to the best of the humans that are drawn to this. And with that kind of energy, with that kind of love, with that kind of intensity, with that kind of focus, I have to believe there's going to be a good outcome. I just have to believe it. I mean, the Petronelle who runs the sanctuary, I asked her this question in the very beginning. I said to her, will rhinos survive? And she said to me, I believe they will survive. Believe it with me.
Yeah.
And I took that on, But the thing of it is, her saying to me, believe it with me, was for me an invitation into action. Because you can't say, believe it with me, and then have the person do nothing.
Right.
Believe it with me is an invitation to action. And I took that on. I took her invitation. I took on the action that she invited me into. And I know that there are very good people doing this. I think that there's a vision. I don't think that the Rhinos are going to do well in government-owned facilities. I don't think that there's enough honesty. I think that there's too much crookedness. I think there's too much addiction to money. And I don't think that the government-owned parks are going to be good for rhinos. However, I think that rhinos are going to survive in what they call privately funded strongholds. So they're privately owned rhinos that are in these incredibly secured areas. And I think that's where rhinos are going to survive. And I think that all we have to do is keep them alive long enough to change that demand. And I think that when kids come into the picture, like youngsters growing up in Vietnam and being exposed to the brutality of what constitutes a status symbol, because in Vietnam, rhino horn is a status symbol. It's not really about, in China, it's all about, cure my cancer, cure my erectile dysfunction. But in Vietnam, it's about status. So I have to believe, and Vietnam is in most of the purchase of rhino horn is in Vietnam. It's not China so much. So Vietnam is the real problem. So I have to believe that youngsters growing up are going to say, I don't want any part of this. I don't want to take powdered rhino horn and sprinkle it on drinks when I have friends over, and that constitutes how cool I am. I don't want any part of that. I don't want any part of putting my fruit in a rhino bowl that's been engraved out of the horn of a rhino that's been butchered. I don't want any part of that. I have to believe that youngsters growing up in Vietnam are going to say, count me out. And I think that's when things are really going to change. So what has to happen is that rhinos have to be kept safe until that happens. And I think that privately funded strongholds will keep rhinos safe. And that's what my organization is attempting to achieve, is let's put money into privately funded strongholds. And we now support 3 different big organizations, and we are putting security in place, strongholds in place. And I think that if we pull that off for long enough, there will be a change of heart.
I believe it with you, Helena. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the thing is, Katerina, that we're in such a vulnerable place.
The whole earth, yeah, the whole earth.
The whole earth. I mean, we couldn't be more vulnerable than we are now. So as a conscious person, as a caring person, as an intelligent person, as a thinking person, we have to do something. And if we all just do something, it can be a little thing, a tiny thing. But imagine if we all did something. I mean, first of all, what a crazy community of humans we would become. How wonderful would we all be if we were all doing something,
And sometimes doing something is saying no, count me out, as you just said earlier. That is a lot already.
Exactly, Katerina. I mean, if you just think about, the whole crisis of of the way we're eating. Just that in and of itself, so the way you eat is your personal politics. It's the way you can say yes or no to something. Just that right there is action enough. So I mean, that's such a true statement. What you're saying is that just saying no is power.
Could you please give us a website for the organization that you started?
Yes, thank you. It's Babyrunner Rescue.org. So that's very, very easy website to remember. So it's, of course, the www.babyrunnerrescue.org. That's what the website is.
So what can a visitor expect to experience?
At the website?
Yeah. Well, not at the website, at the sanctuary.
Okay, at the sanctuary. So basically, you can go to the sanctuary and volunteer, but it's considered, and it is a very authentic eco experience. So you pay for it. You pay for the experience of volunteering with rhinos, and it's a very highly sought after experience. People come from all over the world to do it. Before COVID shut borders down and everything became sort of crazy on us. There were big groups of volunteers at the sanctuary all the time, coming from all over the world. That's the one sanctuary. The other sanctuary doesn't have volunteers at all. But so anybody can sign up to go and volunteer with rhinos at the Rhino Sanctuary. What you will experience is a very authentic, hands-on. You will be mixing milk for rhinos. You will be feeding rhinos at all times of the day and night. You will have your alarm clock on at 2 a.m. because a baby rhino's just come in, and you have to get up at 2 o'clock to go and mix milk and put milk in bottles and get a bottle into a baby rhino's mouth. You will also be shoveling rhino dung and raking out rhino bomas. If a baby rhino comes in, you will be part of the whole experience of getting the rhino into the sanctuary and rehabilitating it, etc. What I experienced, when I went there in 2014 is probably very different. In fact, it is very different to what somebody would experience now, because the sanctuary is much bigger. It has a much bigger staff body. So it's highly unlikely that you would get put in a night pen with a baby rhino like I was. But you will still have an unbelievably authentic experience. I mean, I highly recommend it. It changed my life. You can't be different. You can't be the same, I should say, after an experience like this. I would really do it.
I believe that. I would love to hear another excerpt from your book about rhinos and your experience with them.
More rhinos. Okay, so hold on, Katerina.
Anything you want to read us from the book, that'd be fantastic.
Okay. Hold on, sorry, Katerina, I just lost the place that I wanted to. Okay, 73. Okay, so this is that little baby Manji. So this is the beginning of his story.
Okay.
Baby coming in. This is the word this morning. Mother poached, Sam says, getting ready for the work ahead. The Magnoleti. He's been poached in the Magnoleti. Magnoleti is a killing field. I've seen the rhinos there. They know they're in the danger zone. They scan, anticipating trouble, terrified, jumping, ears twitching, back and forward, standing rump to rump, so one can scan east and one west, one north, one south, in case, because invariably there's trouble coming. Everybody gathers in the field waiting. Petronel is on the walkie-talkie with the helicopter. Yes, I understand that. Roger that. The helicopter crests the hills, rising, a steel dragonfly coming closer. It descends, dust rises up and swallows it whole as it lands, propellers slowing to a standstill. The doors open, the vet jumps out. Through the opening, I see a very small pink creature. His eyes are blindfolded, his ears stopped up. He's sedated, and lie so still he could be dead. He's still wrinkled, his hide baggy, with a snake-like cord hanging from his stomach. Just born then? The teams are ready with blankets. The crinkled pink thing is tilted into a red and black blanket. They run with him. I see only the top of his head, walloped open. Inside the gap, which is a hand deep, the brown orb of his eye moves, fallen from warm amniotic rolling into this. They place the newborn into the van and drive him to the barn. We follow. Let's not move him, the vet says. We'll treat him here, indicating the back of the van. The vet readies to flush the chasm in his skull with antiseptic. Blood mixes with antiseptic runs pellucid pink, splashing into the receptacle beneath his head. I can only give this little guy enough sedative for 15 minutes, otherwise it's getting into the danger zone, he says. He dabs at the crevice. It's dark and deep. I see the eye again, a gentle orb down there, still moving.
Gorgeous writing, Helena. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katerina.
You are a teacher of creative writing at Spalding University, and that's where we met. And here is a question that I ask all my guests who teach creative writing, and that is, what is the most important thing you teach your students if there is one thing you want them to remember from your class?
Oh, what a beautiful question, Katerina. So what I say is, after I've had like a 10-day workshop where we've discussed craft and we've discussed the protagonist and we've discussed the antagonist and we've discussed structure and dialogue and conflict and all that stuff, I say to them at the very end, if you take one thing away with you, you don't have to remember anything that we've discussed for the last 10 days. I'm asking you to take away one thing: develop a fascinated eye. Because that, I believe, is what will stand everybody in good stead as a writer. It doesn't matter if you change your medium. It doesn't matter how old or how young you are. If you develop a fascinated eye, your writing is going to be beautiful, because your writing will show your connection, your appreciation, your fascination with color, with texture, with weather, with wind, with sound. Everything will be there to animate the work that you're writing on. And as well, you will have a different relationship to your world, because if your eye is fascinated, how beautiful is your world? So that's, for me, like the main thing. I mean, if I can achieve just that, I feel as if I've done my job. I really do feel that.
Thank you so much, Helena. I appreciate you coming on the show, telling us what's the most important thing, telling us about travel and creativity, telling us about saving baby rhinos, about your organization and your new book. Good luck to you, good luck to your book, good luck to your writing. And here I say things on accents through the mic, and the universe listens. And I'm going to say this, that I wish for us that in not too distant future, Helena is back on the show to talk about the movie.
Oh, Katerina, it's been such a pleasure to be here with you. I've loved our conversation, and it's just been such a pleasure and such a privilege. I'm so happy that you invited me onto the show. And yes, let's just make that reality. I'm going to be back on this show, and we're going to be talking about the movie. And I look so forward to that. Thank you so, so much.
I appreciate you.